There's a voice in my head that I used to trust. It sounded disciplined, it sounded sharp, and it sounded like it cared about standards. It said things like, "Come on, that was pathetic. You should know better." And for years, I thought that voice was my edge. It wasn't. It was contempt, and I confused it for strength. I'll tell you what this looked like for me. I'd send an email, I'd notice a typo, the immediate drop in the stomach. Idiots. I'd snap at someone at home later that night. "What's wrong with you?" I'd waste an hour scrolling instead of doing the work. Got no discipline. You got no willpower. And it felt justified. It felt adult. It felt like accountability. And I genuinely believed that if I removed that voice, that I'd get soft, adrift. I'd lose my drive. And that belief ran my life. Here's what I eventually noticed. Every mistake triggered stress, and then I added self-attack. That amplified the stress. And when you're stressed, your thinking narrows and you get rigid and you miss nuance. You make more errors, and more errors meant more contempt. And it was a loop. It was mistake, then contempt, stress, more mistakes, more contempt. I called it discipline. It was self-conditioning, and it was exhausting. And this isn't just philosophical. Like, the research is pretty clear here. High self-criticism correlates with anxiety, depression, avoidance. And when the nervous system is under threat, learning narrows. There is a small window where stress sharpens you, but chronic and internal hostility pushes you way past that window. The voice comes fast. It feels justified. It feels necessary. It feels like the adult in the room. And you believe that without this, that the harshness, that you're somehow going to drift. You believe if you let up, you would collapse. And that belief is costing you more than you think. Contempt is not discipline. Contempt increases stress. Stress narrows cognition. Narrow cognition increases mistakes. And mistakes trigger more contempt. When you attack yourself, your nervous system registers that threat. Cortisol rises, heart rate shifts, tension narrows towards danger, and you're primed to defend, not to learn. Learning requires psychological safety. Growth requires space for error. Self-compassion research, led by Kristen Neff and others, shows that people who respond to the future with steadiness rather than self-attack demonstrated a greater resilience and sustained motivation. They persist longer, they recover faster, and they avoid less. Contempt feels intense. Intensity feels productive, and it's not the same thing. Intensity is friction, and friction burns energy. The harsh voice didn't appear randomly, did it? It formed early. If mistakes once led to humiliation, then your brain installed a rule. Punish yourself before others do. If falling short once meant exclusion, then your brain encoded something, and it was like, stay sharp or lose safety. The voice is protective. It learned that preemptive attack reduces vulnerability almost. And it probably once worked, but it now runs everywhere. It runs your inbox, in meetings, in relationships, and probably in your private thoughts. You call it accountability, but it's fear wearing discipline's clothes. If you look closely, what contempt produces, it produces avoidance. If mistakes equal humiliation, then you hesitate to try. And it produces procrastination. If effort risks shame, then delay feels safer. If feedback threatens your identity, then you fight it. It produces isolation. If being seen risks exposure, then you withdraw. Contempt makes you brittle, and you can function while you're brittle, but you can't thrive. Look, you live in an environment here that feeds off this voice. You watch productivity videos, you study systems, and you chase optimization. You feel inspired for 10 minutes, but then you fail to implement perfectly, and then the voice arrives. Then you search for another system, another structure, another tool, and you believe the solution is external, but the problem is internal hostility. And you're not lacking information, you're punishing yourself for being human. Look, there's a tough truth here. And the voice you trust is harming you. You've mistaken aggression for strength. You believe if you soften, then you weaken. And that belief has no evidence. The strongest people I've met don't humiliate themselves. They course correct. They adjust. They move on. There's no drama. There's no identity collapse. And they hold their standards without cruelty. And you can too. I want to talk about the mistake that's actually happening here. The interpretation is that this means I'm incompetent. The emotion is shame. The reaction is self-attack. The physiology is that stress spikes, cognition narrows, and learning pretty much shuts down. And the next mistake is then more likely that the loop will then reinforce the loop itself. And you think that you're motivating yourself, but you're actually conditioning anxiety. Now let's talk about the relationship with yourself. Imagine, speaking to a friend the same way that you speak to yourself. You wouldn't. You know that it would crush them, and you know that they would not produce their best work. Yet you're going to apply that method internally and call it toughness, but it's internalized aggression. You are responsible for how you treat your own mind, and responsibility does not require violence. So what actually does build strength? Strength comes from clear feedback without identity collapse. That didn't work. Adjust. Try again. There's no insult. There's no story about worth. There's no humiliation. The nervous system remains regulated. The mind stays open and behavior has a chance to improve. How do you reset then if you're stuck in this situation? Well, next time the harsh voice appears, write down exactly what it says. Like, don't edit it. Then ask, what value is this protecting? Is it excellence, competence, respect? And keep that value, but rewrite the method. So instead of you're useless, write, that needs correction. Instead of you always screw up, write, that didn't meet the standard. Repeat that pairing enough times and the nervous system relearns. That's how conditioning changes. It's not through slogans, it's through repetition, because that's how you got here. You're not broken, you're pretty much patterned, and the pattern once protected you, and now it's overcorrecting. So you don't need to become gentler than you're capable of being. You just need to stop using hostility as fuel. And you can hold high standards, and you can demand excellence, and you can pursue mastery, but without contempt. That is the death of the cruel voice. A final word. You can keep punishing yourself, and it will produce output. It will produce tension, avoidance, and quiet exhaustion. Or you can retire the aggression and keep the standard. No one can make the decision for you. You just need to know the cost of each. That's all for now. Best on your journey, Chris out.